In 1786, a strip of cloth became part of a government order. If you were a woman of African descent in Colonial Louisiana, officials banned feathers and curls, and required a scarf when your hair was high. The rule was supposed to identify you before you spoke. It was meant to make the colony's racial hierarchy visible. But the women targeted by it found a flaw in the plan. The government could prescribe the cloth. It could not completely control what the cloth meant. To understand why a headwrap worried a governor, you have to enter New Orleans in 1786. It was a port shaped by several worlds at once: indigenous homelands, French settlement, Spanish government, African labor, Caribbean trade, and slavery. The streets did not fit into a simple black and white social picture. Alongside white colonists and enslaved people lived a growing community of free people of color. Some owned property, practiced trades, ran businesses, and built families. But freedom did not mean equality. Race still shaped legal rights, public respect, work, marriage, and personal safety. You could be free from enslavement and still live inside a system designed to keep you below white society. For colonial officials, appearance became part of that system. Free women of color could dress with elegance, display success, and move through public spaces with confidence. Clothing communicated wealth. Hair communicated identity. And to people invested in a rigid hierarchy, blurred visual boundaries felt dangerous. The governor was Esteban Rodríguez Miró. On June 2, 1786, his administration issued a broad proclamation of good government. It regulated public order in New Orleans through 34 articles. Article 5 attacked free black and mixed-race women for what officials called extravagant dress. Article 6 tried to preserve racial distinction through hair. The Spanish text banned feathers and curls. Hair had to be worn flat, or tied with a pañuelo. A handkerchief. When styled high. The document itself did not say Tignon. That is the name history remembers. Head wrapping itself was not invented by Miró. It had deep roots in West African cultures and was already common across the Caribbean and Louisiana. For many enslaved women, a wrap protected hair and kept it clean during difficult work. The insult was not the existence of the cloth. It was the state trying to turn hairstyle into a visible marker of rank. The logic was brutally simple. If free women of color could be made to resemble women associated with enslaved labor, officials hoped their status would appear lower. Flatten the hair. Bind the high styles. Restore the boundary. At least, that was the theory. The order narrowed women's choices, although surviving records do not show how consistently it was enforced. We should not turn coercion into a cheerful fashion story. Not every woman had expensive fabric. And surviving records do not tell us what every wearer privately intended. There was no single response shared by every woman. But clothing leaves evidence of agency even when individual voices are missing. Women could obey the visible rule and still make choices about color, material, height, and shape. A plain marker could become patterned. A covering meant to reduce attention could attract it. The Tignon became an object of Creole style. The regulation had begun to backfire. Accounts and later historians describe women using vivid colors, elaborate knots, and, where wealth allowed, fine fabrics and ornament. The head could still be covered. But the wearer did not become invisible. The same garment now carried two messages. The government tried to say, "Know your assigned place." The wearer could answer, "You still have to see me." That is the weakness in every law built around symbols. Power can prescribe the object more easily than it can freeze the interpretation. This story is often compressed into a perfect slogan: black beauty was made illegal, and women rebelled with fashion. The real history is more complicated. The provision regulated appearance within an existing slave society. The surviving evidence does not prove a coordinated protest campaign. One woman might have chosen a striking wrap as defiance. Another might have followed habit, practicality, fashion, or all three at once. History rarely gives every person the same motive. What we can see is the outcome. The Tignon became fashionable enough to influence women beyond the group the edict targeted. The visual boundary became less stable, not more. Spanish authority ended through the transfers that culminated in the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. The colonial order changed. The style endured. 19th-century portraits preserved the Tignon as part of Creole visual culture long after Miró's proclamation. Head-wrapping traditions continued, changed, and gathered new meanings across generations. That legacy should not be flattened into either pure oppression or a perfect victory. It is both a record of control and a record of people creating room for themselves inside control. Remember the piece of cloth on the desk. Miró's government believed it could assign a meaning to it. The order could reach the street. But once the cloth reached human hands, meaning multiplied. The law tried to make a woman easier to classify. Instead, it created one of the clearest examples of how identity survives classification. You can order someone to wear a symbol. You cannot guarantee that the symbol will still belong to you.